few days ago, the Pope gave an interview to the American network CNN. Here we can say that old axiom of journalism, the medium is the message. Because this medium, which is the Sancta Sanctorum of world progressism, in this medium the Pope spoke about a very important issue, the issue of child abuse carried out by members of the Church. It was inevitable that an American television network would ask the Pope about this issue because it's a topic that always comes up in interviews, especially in interviews that originate in the United States. The Pope has recognized what we all know, that these abuses have existed, that just one of them would have been a tragedy, and that it has not been just one but many, and has insisted on the need to continue taking preventive measures and also to punish and bring to justice those who are guilty. So far, let's say, the normal. But he said something else, very important. He said, first, most of the abuses take place in families, and this is not investigated. Why? Second, not only these abuses take place in families and are not investigated, but only the abuses that take place in the Church that have as responsible someone linked to the Church, not only priests, are emphasized and insisted upon. Why? Although the Pope has not used this expression, he has spoken about it without saying these words. Abuse is being abused. The Pope, in his interview, in his declarations to CNN, has said he has used some data provided by Brazil, has quoted them, according to which the cases that affect the Church without approximately 3% of the abuses produced. The Pope did not find this figure exaggerated, 3% related to members of the Church. But these data from Brazil are not the only ones. Let's take the example of Spain. According to the ANAR Foundation, which is a foundation specialized in child protection, and according to another foundation, Save the Children, according to ANAR, the cases of abuse linked to the Church, not only to priests linked to the Church, are 0.2% of the total. Save the Children in its figures does not even reflect the abuses linked to the Church because they are so few in number that they are insignificant from the statistical point of view. 0.2 linked to the Church. The chance of a minor being abused by a priest is less, 0.2 of being abused by the grandmother, which is a rare thing. The chance of being abused by the grandmother is 0.3%. Well, it is 5 times less than being abused by a leisure monitor, which is 1%. 7 times less than being abused by the mother. 10 times less than the possibility of being abused by a sibling. 20 times less than the possibility of being abused by a cousin, and pay attention to this given, 100 times less than the possibility of being abused by the father, the biological father, not the mother's sentimental partner. The possibility of being abused by a priest is 0.2, 100 times less, in fact more than 100 times less than the possibility of being abused by the father. But in Spain, no general investigation has been opened. A parliamentary investigation dedicated to what happens in families, which is where the vast majority of abuses are committed, and yet a parliamentary investigation has been opened to see what happens in the Church and what part of the blame lies with the church. That is to say, the abused minors do not matter. They are being used as a weapon to erode the church, to see if they destroy her, or at least to see if they take away her prestige, and the church cannot influence in sensitive issues such as abortion, euthanasia, or gender ideology. It is necessary to attack the church, to discredit the church, and the case of the abuse of minors by ecclesiastics that I insist regretfully have occurred and perhaps continue to occur, even if only to a very small extent, that is used to harm the church. That is an abuse of abuse. These minors who were abused are being used for another objective, that is not to prevent these cases, these terrible crimes from occurring again. But not only this is happening from outside the church, also from inside the church an abuse of abuse is being committed. For example, the German Synod started with the excuse of facing abuses committed by priests after some supposedly independent studies that spoke of the number of abuses carried out by priests or religious men and women. That was the excuse. Let's see what we can do to avoid abuses. To avoid abuses, what they want to do is to end celibacy. The Pope has clearly said that child abuse has nothing to do with celibacy, and has given as a clear example precisely that most of the abuses occur in families, and that in families those people do not live in celibacy. But what the Germans were looking for was not to put an end to the abuses, but to modify sexual morality and introduce the whole gender ideology. Of course, the access to the female priesthood, and as we have just seen recently, the Fourth German Synodal Assembly is taking place right now to get the bishops and priests to renounce the mission of governing that is linked to the sacrament of orders, and that this mission is now done by the laity. It is an abuse of the abuse, and this is not only carried out from outside the church to erode the image of the church with the excuse that the church is criminal and is a criminal organization that systematically covers up the crimes committed in it. There is another issue that no one talks about. This is an absolute taboo. The data show that the vast majority of cases of child abuse by the clergy took place in that era where the so-called spirit of the council prevailed. Not the application of the council with the hermeneutic of continuity, but the so-called spirit of the council, which was in a nutshell was something like that everyone does what he wants. At that time, in the countries where the spirit of the council was most applied, or where the true council was most misapplied, at that time and in those countries is where the vast majority of abuses have occurred. But this cannot be talked about, because if data is brought out to prove this, what is considered today by many at least politically correct within the church collapses. Minors matter a lot. As the Pope says, we must continue to apply all possible prevention measures. A single case is a tragedy, but neither the abuse of minors is related to celibacy, nor is it in the church where practically all of these abuses occur. If child abuse really mattered, what governments would have to do is to investigate to see where it happens and how to remedy it. In the meantime, we priests have to continue to put up with, imagine what young priests suffer or what seminarians suffer, this scourge of By being a priest, you are already considered a potential abuser. A potential abuser should be considered any father, because there are 100 times more abuses committed by parents than those committed by priests. Let us continue to pray that the Lord will help His church to confront the enemies from within, who are worse than the enemies from outside. See you next week, God willing.